The year 2026 is preparing catastrophic surprises for the Kremlin. While Russian propaganda continues to paint maps of imaginary victories, tectonic shifts are beginning to occur both at the front and deep within Russia's rear. The war has not only definitely crossed into Russian territory, it is closing in on the very heart of the country. Military political analysts and Ukraine's top leadership are unanimously declaring a decisive turning point has come in the war, and Putin's main trump card, an endless supply of manpower, no longer works. My name is Yevhen Sirov. This is the Holovred channel, and we are starting. Already by the end of this summer and the beginning of autumn, Ukrainian-made ballistic missiles are ready to strike Russian territory, and closer to winter, Ukraine will directly target the very heart of Russia, Moscow itself. Why is the huge Russian army reaching a dead end on the front lines? What are Ukrainian kill zones where thousands of occupiers are ground down? And how did it happen that instead of capturing Kiev, the Russians set a shameful record, 1,500 days of unsuccessful assault on a single small village? Let's figure it out.
Regarding the situation on the front line, in the Zaporizhia direction, our troops have achieved certain successes in the area of Mala-Tokmachka. There are also battles on the outskirts. Fighting continues in Mala-Tokmachka. Battles continue in the area. Fighting continues on the outskirts. Battles for Mala-Tokmachka are ongoing. Our troops have made small advances in the southeastern part of Mala-Tokmachka. Fighting also continues for the southern part of the settlement, and there are battles for the southeastern part of Mala-Tokmachka as well. The assault on Mala-Tokmachka is ongoing, showing progress in the area. Battles are also taking place near Mala-Tokmachka, and the enemy acknowledges our advance in the sector. Yesterday, our troops also liberated Mala-Tokmachka near Orikiv. Today, the Minister of Defense congratulated the units that took part in this. We are also putting pressure and making progress in the area of Mala-Tokmachka and Orekhov with ongoing fighting. We are continuing to maintain this pressure across the regions of Mala-Tokmachka and Magdalinovka and near Shcherbakov. We remain active in Mala-Tokmachka, Magdalinovka, and Shcherbakov.
So, what exactly is happening right now? Ukraine's Minister of Foreign Affairs, Andriy Sybiha, has officially stated that Russia's human resources are no longer its decisive advantage. Western media are picking up on this idea and highlighting two main indicators of Putin's defeat. First, due to regular and large-scale attacks by Ukrainian drones, war has become an everyday reality for Russia's rear areas. And second, for the first time in a long while, Russia has started to lose previously occupied Ukrainian territories. As noted by Alexander Kovalenko, a military and political analyst from the Information Resistance Group, Russian troops are completely exhausted. Throughout 2025, the occupiers acted solely on inertia, relying on the frenzied pace and speed of territorial gains they had achieved in 2023 and 2024 after the start of the Avdiivka offensive campaign. But now, this momentum has finally come to a halt. So why is the Russian war machine stalling? Kovalenko explains this by the colossal gap between Putin's fantasies and the reality in the trenches. Putin sets strategic objectives for his generals to capture all of Ukraine, to fully occupy Donetsk, Zaporizhzhia, and Kherson regions, and finally to settle the issue with Luhansk, which, by the way, they claim to resolve every 6 months since 2022. But the much further these orders from Belousov and Gerasimov are passed down the officer ranks to the commanders of assault companies, the more these strategic objectives turn into frantic tactical convulsions. In practice, the assault of the empire boils down to a Russian unit being tasked with capturing a specific bush, a particular tree line, a battlefield, or a completely destroyed village with 15 evacuated houses. And so, into this tactical meat grinder, the Russian command sends its small tactical groups again and again, wave after wave. The result, and it is truly shameful for the world's second army. Kovalenko cites Ukraine's phenomenal record as an example. 1,500 days of defending the village of Mala Tokmachka. Just think about it. An army with nuclear weapons and billion-dollar budgets can't capture a single village for years. In the conditions of modern high-tech warfare and with the presence of so-called kill zones, that is, pre-sighted and mined areas where Ukrainian artillery and drones destroy everything alive, simply driving people forward no longer works. The occupiers' human resources are not capable of breaking through our defenses without enormous catastrophic losses. That is precisely why Russia is reaching a dead end. Yes, the Russians still have a lot of artillery, although they are losing it in staggering quantities. Yes, they are trying to maintain parity in FPV drones, and, they still dominate in the number of guided aerial bombs used. But drones, guided bombs, and artillery by themselves do not capture territory. In the end, it is people who have to go on the attack, and this is where Russia is starting to face huge problems. And while the enemy is running out of steam, Ukraine is preparing its main move. August and September of this year promise to become a starting point for a new military reality. It is precisely at the end of summer and the beginning of autumn that large-scale use of Ukrainian ballistic missiles is expected. Our own missile programs are entering the home stretch, and this means that strikes on Russian military targets will become even more devastating. Meanwhile, the Russian air defense, which can't even cope with drones, will simply capitulate in the face of our missiles. Military analysts predict that the autumn-winter period will be extremely interesting for Moscow. Ukraine will closely target the capital of the aggressor country and its key decision-making centers. In addition, the situation on the Belarusian border adds tension, where the so-called yellow threat code from Belarus is making the occupiers nervous and forcing them to keep their forces on alert. However, we have to be realistic. Kovalenko frankly warns, breaking through the enemy's defenses is a very long and very difficult process. This will not happen tomorrow, in 2 weeks, or in a couple of months. No. Military experts and analysts remain somewhat uncertain that we will fully witness the final collapse of the Russian army specifically this year. However, the conclusion of Russia's current summer offensive campaign, and its obvious lack of significant results, will create the ironclad conditions for the systemic failure of the Russian defense. This process has already begun. We may very well see its conclusion in 2027. The main thing is that Russia has lost its offensive potential, and its sheer manpower no longer dictates the terms on the battlefield to Ukraine. What do you think about the launch of Ukrainian ballistic missiles? Will this actually change the course of the war this fall, as some experts say? Share your own opinion in the comments. Like this video and be sure to subscribe to the channel. My name is Yevhen Sirov, this is Glavred, and I'll see you in the next video.
Military and strategic analysts have modeled a potential scenario of a possible Russian invasion of Lithuania and concluded that the widespread deployment of modern drones with artificial intelligence could radically change the course of the war in NATO's favor. Overall, the publication described two possible scenarios for a Russian invasion of Lithuania. In the first scenario, after a series of political crises in Europe and a weakening of transatlantic unity, Russia launches a three-pronged offensive against the Baltic country. According to the scenario, troops advance through eastern Latvia, attack from Belarusian territory toward Vilnius, and simultaneously break through from the Kaliningrad region. As a result, by the fifth day of fighting, the capital of Lithuania is almost encircled. The report notes that under such conditions, NATO allies hesitate to respond, and part of the alliance's territory falls under Russian control, with Russia threatening to use nuclear weapons to hold its captured positions. However, there is another, much more optimistic scenario of a Russian offensive against Lithuania. In this scenario, the initial conditions were identical, but the Lithuanians and Germans entered the war each possessing 12,000 kamikaze drones, and as a result, the first phase of the Russian invasion essentially failed. With a flight range of about 96 kilometers, a weight slightly heavier than a one-year-old child, and an attack speed comparable to that of a golden eagle in a dive, these devices are essentially smart flying bombs that typically carry shrapnel or a warhead capable of penetrating the armor of Russian tanks. The publication described these drones. However, as noted, their main advantage lies in the artificial intelligence-based guidance system, which allows the drone to reach its target even when electronic warfare disables traditional navigation systems. The article states that these drones have been used on the front lines in Ukraine for about a year already. Just recently, a senior official from the German Ministry of Defense released a detailed internal assessment report stating that the first batch of drones malfunctioned in about 3 out of 4 cases during periods of intense Russian electronic jamming. However, today, they are believed to have achieved a hit rate of 60 to 80% in combat conditions, which not only significantly surpasses most American and European systems, but also nearly matches the performance of the elite Russian Lancet loitering munitions, the publication emphasizes. It is reported that 6 months ago, this drone impressed British military personnel during exercises in Kenya, where it consistently hit targets designated by a ground reconnaissance robot, while other European loitering munitions could barely even launch properly. In a military simulation where the Russians invaded Lithuania and were opposed by NATO forces equipped with a significant number of such drones, the Russian troops could not withstand the assault. More than a third of their forces were destroyed within the first 10 days. Greg Melcher, former head of operations at the Pentagon's Naval Department, who oversaw this war game together with the Washington Center, stated that the simulation demonstrated even if the US and other NATO allies hesitate, a frontline state like Lithuania is capable of defending itself effectively, provided it has the right weaponry. Most frontline nations in the region could cultivate the necessary capabilities to deter and, if necessary, defeat at least 3 Russian first echelon armies within 1 to 2 weeks, thereby securing the critical window of time required for the arrival of coalition forces of the willing or NATO under Article 5, who would then provide the support needed to defeat the Russian second echelon armies, he said. And what do you think about this? Do you agree with the experts and analysts who believe that Russia could launch an offensive against one of the NATO countries in the near future? And which country do you think it could be? Write your comments, we'll read them. Give us a like. See you next time.